Mr. Hill, may we get a roll call?
Ms. Falkenberg? Mrs. Jones? Mrs. King? Ms. Lee?
Here.
Mrs. Shelby?
Here. Oh, thank you. All right. Hold on, y'all. Trying to get my life. My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Kaple. And we'll start with line item number 2, the minutes from the meeting, the regular meeting September 17, 2024, and the special meeting of September 24th, 2024. And this will be approved as recorded or corrected. Furthermore, the reading of these minutes will be waived. And we have a roll call, Mr. Hill.
Can we get a motion?
Oh, can we have a motion? I have to say it like that.
Just watching out for you. Now I can get a roll call. Unless anybody's got questions.
Anybody have any questions or concerns? May we get a roll call, Mr. Hill?
Mrs. King? Aye. Mrs. Shelby? Aye. Ms. Falkenberg? Aye. Ms. Lee?
Aye. All right, and then we'll go to line item number 3, our discussion items for today. Is we'll be discussing our 5-year forecast, which will be presented to us by our treasurer, Mr. Josh Hill.
Good evening. I have supplied everybody with some documents, giving you a summary, the assumptions, the forecast itself, and then I gave you a print off, and when I get to this point.
Are you collecting one of these back?
No, you can keep them. Yeah, it's all good. I'll get to the additional handout at the end, or during it when I hit throughout the forecast. So I'll work through it. Under revenue, 1.01, general property taxes. It's about 75.03% of the overall revenue. The estimate for fiscal year 25 is $50,473,447. The amount is approximately $110,000 more than what it was received in fiscal year 2024. This is where I will factor in this last sheet. So I included this. This is the county's estimate on what we should receive if the values hold true through effective January 1st. So it'll be a half-a-year collection on, it'll be $1,023,935. So obviously I have some additional reductions in here to offset some of that, but typically from year to year, I would estimate a decrease. This actually gets us into the positive. And so the only piece that this affects is our inside millage. Anything on the outside is not impacted by that fluctuation. And if anybody needs further explanation of that, I'm happy to explain why that is. I know a lot of people struggle with the fact that, okay, our values are going up. Why is that not additional revenue on all sources of revenue for property taxes? It has mainly to do with the factor of the formula. So if you're looking at the values going up, then the millage usually offsets that increase. So that you have those fluctuations that way. So really the only thing that you're guaranteed on is that inside millage, because that one's not affected by the reduction factors. Well, that's a new document. This is the new estimate with the assessed values climbing the way they are. Yeah. The other piece that we will see a positive increase on will be when we come for new money. So now we can propose less millage for based on the values, and right off the bat, you should see basically each mill is worth more now when we go to request funds. So we can get more bang for our buck when we go. Gotcha. Yeah. So that's where you really see the biggest, I guess, impact for the district.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense.
So let's see here then. I touched on the $2 million. Talking about delinquencies, I always bring up delinquent tax collections. We received just under $2 million in delinquent tax collections in 24. And I took into account about 75% of that because we have been trending up with our delinquent tax collections. So typically I was at 50%. I'm trying to hone it in, get it closer to where we normally are. I still am never going to go 100% because I don't want to be dependent or guaranteeing those delinquent tax collections. So I did 75%, which gets to about 1.4, not quite as close to that 2 million, which is what we've actually seen. And an additional increase is assumed for fiscal year 26 because this is the other half of this new value hitting for the inside millage. So the way it hits January 1st, we'll get a half a year, and then for 26, you'll get that full year. So it's an additional jump up of that, the 511,000. And then no increase is assumed for fiscal year 27 through 29 within the forecast. That same total of 50,985,414, which is in 26, will be continuous. Line 1.035, your unrestricted grants and aid. This is about 8% of the total revenue. No increase or decrease is assumed for any future biennium budgets beyond the current one. This last fiscal year, the district received $208,000, just over $208,000 from casino tax. That projected, we're keeping that consistent throughout the forecast. We're projected to receive that same amount for the current fiscal year. And then the estimate for grants and aid overall, and this is your foundation funds. Everything that is unrestricted is going to be within this line item, as well as the casino tax for fiscal year 25. It's almost 5.4 million, and then no increases assumed for fiscal year 26 through 29. I would assume, obviously we're erring on the side of caution here, I would assume we're going to see the adjustment that we've continually, or that I won't say continually, we saw it for 1 year now. They're using the updated data. They originally were back 2019 data to use as factors for how we receive our funding. They ended up changing it to 23 for this year. I would assume they're going to update it again for 24, but obviously that's not built in here because I don't believe it till I see it. Line item 1.04, restricted grants and aid. This is comprised of additional foundation funding that is outside of the formula. This is your English learners funding, gifted, economical disadvantage funding, career tech funding, and the student success and wellness funding. The estimated funding totaled just over 1.2 million, and no increases assumed for fiscal year 26 through 29. Line 1.05, the state share of local property taxes. This line is directly correlated to general property tax, except for the 2020 levy that they switched that up to where it doesn't qualify for that. The district estimates to receive 5.75 million in fiscal year 25, and no increases assumed for 26 through 29. Line 1.06, all other revenue, 5.92% of total revenue. You see a decrease in fiscal year 25, 3.9 million compared to what the district received in 24, just over 4 million. This has to do with increased interest earnings assumed. This amount steadily decreases due to the interest earnings from 26 to 29. So it's assuming our overall cash that we have on hand is decreasing because with this, we're deficit spending for the balance of the forecast. So we can't bring in as much interest, so that the interest earnings will decrease, which in turn is decreasing the overall pot of this. That's all the revenue. Did anybody have any questions on the revenue for now before I move on to expenditures? Okay. So expenditures, line 3.01, this is your personal services. This represents 55.19% of overall expenditures. All three unions agreed to a percent increase for cost of living for each year of their 3-year contract. That is factored in here with the new contracts. The personal services updated estimate for fiscal year 2025 is $38,884,347. A 5% increase was assumed for fiscal year 25 through 27 based on cost of living and a 2% step increase. For 28 through 29, only the 2% step increase is assumed each year. Again, I always give this caveat. It's important to understand that the increase does not assume that all staff will receive 5% for fiscal year 25 through 27 or 2% increase for 28 through 29, but that overall salary expenditures will increase by about that percentage. Line 3.02, employees' retirement insurance benefits, represents about 24.32% expenditure of overall expenditures. The estimate for fiscal year 25 is $17,134,504, and that includes all benefits for current staff, except there's some outliers, cafeteria staff, and then a handful of teachers that are paid out of federal grant funding. For fiscal year 26 through 29, the district has projected individual increases to each of the sections included in the benefit line item. An average increase of roughly 7.7% overall is assumed. Again, same caveat, this doesn't mean that every benefit item is growing by 7.7%, but that some might be higher and some lower for an average of 7.7%. Lines 3.03, 3.04, and 3.05. This is 3.03 is purchase services. It's 12.24%. 3.04 is supply and materials, and that is 3.33% of overall expenditures. And then capital outlay, which is 0.85% of overall expenditures. The estimate for fiscal year 25 in these categories are $8,623,963 for purchase services, $2,343,524 for supply and materials, $597,190 for capital outlay. No increases assumed for purchase services for fiscal year 26 through 29. No increases assumed for supply and materials beyond fiscal year 25. And capital outlay, same, no increases assumed. This is due to, again, the zero-based budgeting model that we have always tried to combat. We're looking for ways to cut, and we're always going to try, if somebody proposes a new increase, we're going to look at, okay, is it replacing something? We're always trying to contain costs in that way. So the overall outlook, ending cash balance is expected to decline during fiscal years 26 through 29 from $17 million at the end of 26 to an estimated negative balance of $19,558,287 at the end of 29. This is basically right on track. I know that one of the tasks when I got hired was that we wanted some consistency with the forecasts and not the up and down, and, you know, one year we're okay for this fiscal year, the next year we're not. This is exactly the same point. So fiscal year 28 is the point to where we said that we're going to be negative. So it's trending the exact same way. Obviously, same caveat. This is worst case scenario. We're hoping to. I think we're averaging doing about $2 million better each year, so we should be able to try and cover some of that deficit. But obviously, we're still, regardless if we're doing better, we are still deficit spending, and it's something me and Dom talk about probably every other day, if not every day. So yeah, the last paragraph there. The forecast is a worst case scenario, always assuming increased expenditures and flatlined and decreased revenues, barring a drastic or unforeseen decrease of revenue or increase of expenditures. We should always finish better than this projected forecast, and the zero-based budgeting should help with that. We will continue to scrutinize our continued efforts of fiscal scrutiny, and I'm confident in the direction we're going. That being said, I think me and Dom, we're going to look. What we really want to do is get a handle on what the new assessed value is truly going to be, and then I think we need to start having some serious discussions about what that next levy might look like. I think it's never too early to have those discussions, especially when we can say, you know, if we do it a year early, we do it a year later, it could be this millage versus this millage, because when you have it and it's compounding year over year, to wait from a November even to, you know, a later election, maybe just the next election the next year, you're losing one full year of funding, which could mean a drastic difference in what your ask is. So, questions?
The
It's basically everything that our PI funding can't pick up, so that is the piece. If we have something that we can't fit in PI, that capital outlay is gonna fit in there. That can also be, some like book adoptions, things like that, something with a, more of a long-term sustainability. Not your consumables that would be in your supply and materials typically.
And it says, continued unknown effects of COVID-19. Are we still seeing some issues?
I will leave that in until we see zero effect. But I think the biggest thing that we're still seeing is costs of things. So if we go out for bid on anything, everything is still, and now whether or not, I'm a little bit of a, I don't necessarily believe that, feel like a lot of places are still using that to keep the price high. But we are still seeing that increase. So until we see that kind of come down as well, I'm always going to leave that caveat in here because we're still feeling the effect. Mhm. Any other questions? Well, if you have any, we have until next week. We'll approve it next Tuesday's meeting. Obviously, if you want to sit down individually, we can work through stuff too. Always available. Just let me know.
And just to add on to a couple things that Josh said during our meetings, which happen planned and unplanned just about daily. A couple things that we're looking at. You're seeing some mega levies out there right now in some districts, and we're really trying to continue to keep ours minimal for our community who has always supported us out there. So that's one of the big things. When he says it's never too early, that's something we're already looking at, so we can keep it minimal. And then the second thing is he touched on the PI dollars, and he's taught Lee and I a lot with the permanent improvement dollars and some different things that we can now wrap our head around on different projects, whether it's roofing, what direction we're going to go with that. We're going to find out more down at OSBA. We have some meetings set up down there, and also with some different renovation projects. We have some different avenues where we can go now that we have our heads around the PI and developing that game plan. And we set an internal deadline to really have the roof solidified, meaning what are we doing, for lack of better words, by the middle of January. So then from there, we can really plan out that PI money. So.
Yeah. And obviously, to that effect, we got to continue to repair the roofs. So that's still going on. It's more so like looking long-term, because whether or not we do a long-term replacement, we're currently kind of on a kind of patch and fix as we go. I'd like to get on some bigger fix to where we can kind of play, instead of playing catch-up always, actually get out in front of it. So whether we look at some sort of creative funding piece, we've looked at other options. I mean, everybody's heard about the solar panel option to where they'll cover the replacements of the roofs. We got to make sure we're doing our due diligence to make sure. We want to reach out to people that's actually went through it and see, do they still feel the same way about it as they did before? And just make sure before we take that plunge. From all accounts, it sounded too good to be true, so that's why we're trying to make sure it is legit, and we'll figure that out. That's why he mentions OSBA. We're going to try and talk to a couple vendors down there that deal with it, while also tapping into some of our experts. You know, we use Amoresco for the AC. They also do a lot of that stuff. So they've kind of been a couple of we've leaned on them as well as a few other experts to say, like, does this make sense for us?
Maybe you'll just put in many, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think,
Too early to tell.
yeah, and I think, by all accounts, we're hearing that if you're able to fund the purchase of solar panels and you own them and go through all that it's kind of a win-win. It's a no-brainer. It's the initial startup cost that kind of makes that, and I'm imagining that's what Mayfield did, was buy their own. We haven't looked into it yet, but I would imagine they purchased them their own. So
We met with Lee, what was the first day it rained? Oh, today's Tuesday, so it was yesterday. And 4 of our 6 buildings had leaks going on in them. Now, kudos to our custodial staff, maintenance staff, teachers, everybody, they, you know, adapted well, but, I mean, that's not okay for a learning environment.
No.
So that's why it's number one right now. Once we figure out the roofs, then everything else will domino effect from there.
Yeah.
There is no need for executive session.
October 29th is the brush blood drive in Wilshire, and they always can use blood. And it also helps students to get scholarships
Okay.
for college, so.
Anything else, anybody else? That being said, motion to adjourn tonight's meeting. All in favor? Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank